Good evening. Standing in a space like this previously, when I say good evening, well, good evening. Welcome all who are gathered in community with us this evening. Whether here in the lovely Whiteman Chapel on the campus of the Scarlett Bennett Center in Nashville, or gathered in community with us beyond the doors of this place, wherever you may be, we are present with you and you with us. For those joining the live stream, I'm not sure, you probably can't see the pews, but know that the empty spaces that are here are your seats with us. And wherever you are, we hope you sense the presence of community with you now. Before we get started officially, I think there's a couple of words of sort of hospitality that we should cover. Thank you for your understanding on needing to continue to be masked, except for those of us who get to go up here and blab on a bit. So thank you very much for your understanding on that. We are so glad to be back here in the Whiteman Chapel at the Scarlett Bennett Center. We appreciate the coordination with them. It is sad that we cannot have the reception that we normally have after the time of reflection and remembrance this year, but know that the community partners are many. Especially, we want to thank Lindsay Treadway, the Director in the Office for Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion at Vanderbilt University, who worked in collaboration with the Vanderbilt Office for LGBTQI Life, along with a gathering of Nashville community partners to make this evening possible. I don't think that it would be out of order to offer a hand at that. Now, before I was out, even to the rest of the world, I was present in this space, in this time of remembrance and solidarity. The first service I went to was actually in the intimate little all-faith chapel in the Divinity School across the street, in its press of people. Then later, here, taking in the goings-on from a bird's eye seat up there in the balcony. But then last year, which could have been a year of absence for us all together, last year found us sending signals, pinging each other across our scattered distance. There was a few who recorded themselves in the sanctuary of Glendale United Methodist Church, others from their homes, others still displaced and coming to us from places betwixt and between. And yet, from our in-placed shelters, we said to each other, dee, 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 still here. Dee, 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 dee. Remember. Dee, 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 dee. Stay strong. Stay safe. Now, returning here, we find ourselves in a flurry of all these feelings, a bit overwhelmed with the yet still newness of being around folks again. Being around other people? What? Their realness, our realness, exciting and assuring, while also, if being honest, maybe still a little anxiety-provoking. Even to watch the live stream is to participate in something different than what we've become used to. That is, watching just an odd assortment of little Brady Bunch cubes. Wherever we are still very conscious of the presence of each other. In the giddy rush of gathering, though, we also carry with us the anxious energy generated from the ways far too many have been relentless in their striving to drive out this community, our community, from the public sphere, and trying to absent us from venue upon venue of life. They've been striving to bar us from sports fields, to erase us from textbooks and classrooms, to limit our access to doctors' offices and public facilities, from the very places that have held themselves as refuges and safe places. And they have worked to clear us out. And this rhetoric has worked all too well, for this has been a deadly year. And as we will soon hear, actually the deadliest. In these bodies, we wear the wounds of politics. In those named and remembered, they have suffered its fatal blows. And so now I wonder much more about absence, about the gaps where people could have been but are not, between us and between the places taken in this space by our more distant gatherers. There appears room still for others. From this vantage point, the spaces people have left between each other seem not so much polite distance or COVID protocol, but the places one of the all too many named this evening could have occupied, could have been sitting, in which they should have been embraced and held. Where would they place themselves? What would they say to us here and now? Walt Whitman, who seems appropriate enough to quote this evening, wondered much the same. I wish I could translate the hints about the dead young men and women, and the hints about old men and mothers and the offspring taken soon out of their laps. What do you think has become of the young and old men? And what do you think has become of the women and children? I do not have a ready answer for these questions, but reading from more recent canon, the powerful anthology of radical trans poetics called I Want It All, I came upon something lovely in its question and response that hinted at what might be said, that might have been dreamed, that might have been hoped for by some of those absent yet remembered this evening. From Yes, a Conversation by Jose Diaz. Do you think I'll die alone, in a compromised position, facing the ocean? I wonder how many miles deep sunbeams go into the water. When you find my body, will you dump me into the sea and make sure I sink deep, but not so deep that the sun never hits me? Yes, I'll throw you over my shoulders and push your body into the waves like flotsam. I'll dive down with you until I find the perfect spot. It won't be so hard to do. I don't think sunlight can swim far. I like to imagine you in the world without me. I see you shirtless, how you prefer to be, standing over the kitchen counter mixing mac and cheese. You're wearing a silly pinwheel hat, and you're shaking your rump to Destiny's Child song. Do you ever imagine me in the world without you? Yes, you are barefoot, stepping over jagged pebbles, reaching for the makeshift scythe you keep by the fruit trees. You are slicing off part of a branch so the fruits will fall. The sunlight splits after hitting the hanging lemons. Some have fallen on their own and now spotted with rings of mold. You cradle a batch of ripe ones, careful not to spill any, but still one escapes to roll across the dirt. Do I pick it up? This time, you dig your nails into the skin. Such are the hints we have about those we come to remember, about what they might once have uttered or longed for or hoped. We come to honor those hopes deferred and hold space between us for the ongoing presence of the people to whom they once belonged. Doing so, we give thanks for them. We laugh. We cry. And today we come together to tend to the press and realness of these bodies and our bodies, and to offer strength, healing, care for and with each other. Welcome. Thank you. And let us remember together.
Good evening. On behalf of Nashville's transgender community and of all of the groups that have worked together to make tonight's ceremony possible, wish to thank each and every one of you for being here with us tonight. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our former mayor and candidate for judge, David Briley, is here with us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here. And I apologize to any other elected officials or candidates I might have missed. But again, thank you as well for being here. And we especially, as you heard, wish to thank especially Vanderbilt University and the Office of LGBTQI Life for helping coordinate tonight's event. We appreciate all of you who are here with us tonight, both in person and virtually. Due to the ongoing threat of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is especially dangerous for marginalized groups, which face discrimination in accessing health care and are often forced to work in high-risk jobs requiring a lot of personal interaction. We appreciate those of you who are here in person, who are masked and vaccinated, because you value the life of others around you. And for that reason, if you haven't already turned off your cell phones, we ask that you do so by now. The first Transgender Day of Remembrance was held on November 28, 1999, to mark the first anniversary of the murder of Rita Hester, who died of multiple stab wounds in Boston, a crime which remains unsolved. We here at Nashville joined in November of 2002, making this now the 20th consecutive year we have gathered together to remember those we have lost in Nashville and around the country. And over the years, additional ceremonies have been added in all three grand divisions across the state of Tennessee, from Johnson City to Memphis, as we remember the victims of hate and violence. Since the last Day of Remembrance in November 2020, when we were not able to gather, but we did meet virtually, there have been numerous murders of transgender and gender nonconforming people around the world, at least 46 of which occurred in the United States. Those stories come from all categories of race and age, and they include Danielle Johnson, who was shot on the streets of Memphis just 9 days ago on November 7th. Unfortunately, the tragedies can sometimes be self-inflicted because of the bullying and harassment transgender and gender nonconforming youth and adults experience, leading to suicides that are often overlooked by the media. In Tennessee, while our state hate crimes law is inclusive of transgender people, the Tennessee Attorney General continues to file briefs arguing that employers should have the right to fire LGBT employees even after the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that we are protected by federal legislation. At the local level, we continue to work with the Metro Police Department by holding regular trainings of officers on transgender issues. And just this morning, I began my day in front of the Metro Benefits Board advocating for full health care benefits for transgender Metro employees. And we hope and urge the Metro Benefits Board to adopt our resolution and end the discrimination against Metro employees who happen to be transgender. Sadly, members of the Tennessee General Assembly made headlines this year by passing the broadest slate of hate of any legislature in the entire country, adopting 5 anti-LGBTQ laws, 4 of them transgender specific. They have criminalized transgender students' use of gender-appropriate facilities and of their ability to play sports with gender-appropriate teams, while trying to deny transgender youth access to much-needed health care. These measures will lead to more bullying and harassment of transgender and gender nonconforming students. At the federal level, the new administration has ruled that transgender people are covered by laws banning discrimination in the workplace, in schools, in doctors' offices, in homeless shelters, and in the military. Thus, we urge more direct action by the Biden administration to stand up to the slate of hate and join, or better yet, lead the lawsuits now being filed against all these hateful laws. We wish to remind President Biden that he has stated repeatedly that, quote, trans rights are the civil rights issue of our time, unquote. We wholeheartedly agree. It is time for the federal government to step in and put a stop to the actions by the state of Tennessee. And just as the transgender community is diverse, representing all walks of life, so too do the people we remember tonight. We come from every ethnic, religious, and socioeconomic group, although even a cursory glance at photos will show that the majority tend to be African American or Latino trans women. While the majority of recent victims have been male to female male members of our community have often been victimized by brutal hate crimes, as illustrated by the story of Brandon Brayman, or Brandon Tina, as he was more popularly known, who was brutally murdered along with 2 of his friends in Humboldt, Nebraska on New Year's Eve 1993, as shown in the film Boys Don't Cry. We remember those who died because they were denied access to health care, such as my dear friend Robert Eads of Georgia, who died of cancer after being turned away by 22 doctors because he was transgender. We remember those who died on the streets, like Dewana Johnson of Memphis, who was turned away from homeless shelters because she was trans. We remember those who died at the hands of the police, like Tony McDade of Tallahassee, Florida. We remember those who died in the hands of ICE after seeking legal asylum in the United States to escape anti-transgender violence in their own countries, like Roxana Hernandez of Honduras and Johanna Medina Leon of El Salvador. We remember those who died at their own hands because of the lack of acceptance of transgender people, like Julie Smith of Scottsville, Kentucky, Danielle Franklin of Ashland City, Tennessee, Stormageddon Fowler from Nashville, and tonight we add the name of Aaron Clark. Of course, in October 2009, the then President of the United States, Barack Obama, signed a new law that makes hate crimes against all transgender, as well as lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, now a federal crime. This moment was the culmination of many years of hard work by transgender rights advocates and our allies, who stood by us as others were willing to leave transgender people out of vital pieces of legislation. But we still need protection. The passage of the Federal Equality Act would provide this. This bill has passed in the House of Representatives this year, and we thank Congressman Jim Cooper and Steve Cohen for supporting it from the state of Tennessee, but it is now sitting behind the blatantly undemocratic filibuster in the Senate. It is time to act, and if we are committed to ending the violence, which continues to silence trans and thus to end the violence, which continues to silence transgender and gender nonconforming people around the country. And we urge everybody to contact both of our U.S. senators and tell them that trans lives matter. The issue of anti-transgender violence has gained increasing prominence in the last several years, but as we see, with a record number of victims tonight, the violence continues. And that is why we are here tonight, in Murfreesboro this Saturday, and in similar locations all around the world over the course of Transgender Awareness Week. We gather to remember those who were taken from us far too early simply because they wanted to live their lives and were denied that opportunity.
We will now read the names of our trans siblings that we have lost. I am joined by Rhea Evelyn Darling, who I'm proud to say is a student turned friend. And we will read the names of the trans lives we've lost specifically in the state of Tennessee. Then we will go on to read the names of those who have lost their lives to anti-transgender violence this past year throughout the United States. These are the Tennessee names.
Nakia Liddell Baker, 31. Tiffany Berry, 21. Dreona Blake. Dion Brown, 24. Michelle Byrne. Cynthia and Felicia Kaufman, 22. Anna Melissa Cortez, 20. Cicely Dianca, 33. Gizzy Fowler, 24. Danielle Franklin, 27. Willie B. Houston, Duana Johnson, Danielle Johnson, Linda Krager, Alexandra Leos, 41, Michelle Marie, 40, Greg McKendry, P. Nuts, Christian Page, 24, Reverend John Gypsy Prowett, Della Reeves, Lester Childress. Julie Smith, Allison Kristen Tidwell, Tristan Van, 47, Frank Francine Wilson, Ebony Whitaker, 20, Barry Winchell, 21.
These are the names of those that we have lost this year across the United States. Tiana Deveria Alexander, 28. Samuel Edmund Damian Valentin. Bianca Muffin Banks, 30. Dominique Jackson, 30. 50 bands, 21. Alexis Braxton, 45. China Carrillo, 24. Jeffrey J.J. Bright, 16. Jasmine Kennedy, 22. Jenna Franks, 34. Adalyn Evans, 24. Diamond Kyrie Sanders, 23. Rayana Pardo, 26. Jada Peterson, 29. Dominique Luscious, 26. Remy Fennell, 28. Tiara Banks, 24. Jahaira Dialto Elenciaga, 42. Natalia Smoot, 24. Iris Santos, 22. Tiffany Thomas, 38. Kerry Washington, 49. Thomas Harden, 35. Whispering Wind Bear Spirit, 41. Sophie Vasquez, 36. Donica Danny Henson, 31. Serenity Hollis, 24. Poe Delwyn Black, 21. Oliver Ollie Taylor, 17. Tiara Marie Lewis, 36. E.J. Boykin, 23. Erin Clark, 21. Taya Ashton, 20. Shai Vanderpump, 23. Miss Coco, 44. Pooh Johnson, 25. Zoella Zoe Rose Martinez, 20. Desaya Monet, 27. Brianna Hamilton, 25. Kier Laprie Cartier, 21. Mel Groves, 25. Royal Political Stars, 26. Jessica Hart, 42. Joe Acker, 26. Ricky Ottomore, 39. Markeisha Lawrence, 28. This year, like every year, hundreds of our trans siblings from across the globe have lost their lives to senseless anti-transgender violence. Each had their own unique story and livelihood, and we honor all of their memories here this evening. Rest in power. So, I would like to introduce and welcome up a young person, friend of mine, Natalie Bouillon, excuse me. Ooh, my heart is racing. Natalie was a friend of Poe Black, who you may have seen on the United States list, but actually was a really important community member of the transgender youth community here in Nashville. And Natalie will share some words about Poe.
Hi, it's good to see the upper half of so many beautiful faces. I have to make things a little light for myself and let y'all know that I have a great deal of love for you guys and your community. And I'm not a member of the trans community at all, but Poe was one of my best friends, and he was. Poe Delwyn Black, sometimes also known as Poe Jackson or Oliver Jackson, was a friend I met in high school. We went to Nashville School of the Arts together. He's a really talented visual artist, and he had so many creative ideas that he was always putting onto paper. Some of these were about his trans identity. Some of them were just other things that he thought were beautiful or funny or crazy or scary. And all of this, that beautiful art, the beautiful soul that he had, taught me about him. And I grew to love him, and we were very, very close. He was so funny. He was really kind. He had been through so much in his life. I can remember in high school knowing that he would be sleeping in an RV right outside of a condemned house with no running water, knowing that he slept there every night, or that he would have to stay with friends, knowing that he couldn't do his schoolwork, knowing that he couldn't eat some dinner some nights. All of these things that he went through, he was still so strong and positive and uplifting through it all. And of course, there had been times where you could see that based on his conduct, the struggle was really showing, it was wearing on him, but he always just tried to make things right whenever he messed up. He was always loving. And through that, he really taught me a lot. And so I've thought really extensively since I was asked to speak at this event, which I'm very blessed and honored by. Thank you very much. About what Poe would want me to say. So I'm going to start off with how I got here, and then I'm going to tell you guys what I know that he would want you to know, because he's no longer here to tell his story. Back in December, Poe was in a really good spot in his life. He had never had much growing up. He didn't really have money. I related to him a lot because we both came from broke, mixed Native families, and we both had the experience of kind of blending into white society, but still loving our Native culture and wanting to be part of it, and that was something we bonded over. And he was proud to be a trans two-spirit man. He had just gotten top surgery, which he worked his tail off to pay for. I mean, he worked so hard. He had his car, he had a spot to live at, and he was ready to go out and see the world. He was getting to a place where he was truly happy. He was letting go of past, issues with people who had hurt him. He was forgiving people. He had let go of so many of the burdens that were on his shoulders, but yet still in Nashville, he didn't feel like he belonged here. He didn't feel like he could be himself here. And he, for the lack of love expressed, did not realize how many people wanted him here. So he took a trip. We're all young at some point in our lives. I am right now. We all have to be young and have that wild streak and go out and see the world. And that's what he was doing. And I thought that it would be really great for him. And in many ways it was. But, where he decided to go, ultimately that was where he lost his life. So in December, Poe left Nashville. The last time I saw him, I gave him a headlight to put in his vehicle so that, he wouldn't get a ticket or anything, because Lord knows I hate getting pulled over. Wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's always anxiety-inducing. And so, I gave him that taillight, and I gave him a hug, and he told me he would be back soon. And then a couple days later, he made the journey across the United States to Slab City in Southern California, not too far from the Mexican border. It was a place that Poe had talked about wanting to go to for a really long time. He was a really big fan of Kesha, huge fan. And I don't know if you saw her music video for the song Prayin', but that music video really got him wanting to go out there and see it in person. So now that he had the money, he had the car, he's like, I'm gonna go see this. And knowing that Slab City, it does have a beautiful, artistic, transient community of artists who come in and out throughout the year. It also has a very strong queer community. People of all different gender identities, ethnic backgrounds have come there to find acceptance, and find community, and live in a way where they truly feel free. That's the thing about Slab City that attracts so many people. And it was a blessing to Poe while he was there to get to experience some of the things that he hadn't. He felt like he had a community around him that he hadn't felt before. He had so many beautiful new experiences and incredibly terrifying ones too. And he was very loved and accepted in the queer camp called the Flamingo Camp at Slab City that he resided in. Well, May 1st, he started calling some people, and he had been out of touch for a while, and the person he was dating at the time had told his mother that he was sick and he couldn't make the journey home that he was wanting to make. I missed his call, and in hindsight, I can't decide whether that's a good thing or not, because I don't know if I would have been able to handle it, but hearing from others the reason that he called them that day, I'm grateful that he called it all, whether I answered it or not. He called to say that he was scared he was going to die. He called to say that he loved us. And then on May the 6th, he went missing. Now, Slab City doesn't really have a strong law enforcement presence, so it's not like anyone was going to go and file a missing persons report immediately, And frankly, people would go walking around to different places all the time, so it might be, pretty normal to not see someone for a few days. And then people started to get worried when a couple days passed. And then on May 11th, an unidentified body was found floating in a canal. The police took pictures of the tattoos on that body. Now keep in mind, Poe was a trans man. He had had top surgery. And when the police went around Slab City with the photos of the tattoos and trying to give a description of Poe, they walked around saying they had found the unidentified body of a young female, misgendered. No mention of the efforts that Poe had made to have the body that he wanted to have, that he felt comfortable in. And that was something that was vital to identifying him. If not for the fact that he was tattooed, he might not have been identified at all. This began kind of a saga of the police out there in Imperial Valley County, where, or Imperial County, I guess it's called, where Slab City is located, being very difficult to work with, which is something that I know has quite a bit to do with the fact that he was a trans man. He was living in poverty, and he was considered houseless by legal standards. You know, something that oftentimes our systems in this country look down upon. But his life was so important, and he was so loved. And so I found this out May 22nd because people from out there were posting on his Facebook page saying, "Rest in peace." Well, you know, he didn't go by his legal last name there, of course. That's his dead name. Why would he? You know, who wants to do that? So no one knew how to get in touch with his family. I did. And so when I found out that he had passed away, I started contacting people that he was friends with and asking them, you know, what happened? Have you told anybody? Do the police know? And then the next day, I called one of his relatives and let them know that their precious baby had been found dead. And it broke my heart. I'm still not okay. And since that day, I've been trying to find out who brutally killed one of the best people I've ever known. And so that experience has led me down a path that I've never been quite familiar with before. I do work for a missing persons advocacy organization. I'm a Chickasaw woman, and I serve my people with the organization Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women USA. We do also serve Two-Spirit transgender people. We do also serve men through another outlet. And so I started using my platform to get Poe's story heard. The beautiful thing is that people listened, that people cared. We started having all kinds of inboxes coming in, emails coming in, asking, for details so that they could share Poe's story, get things heard. And that's been a blessing. It was crazy to see that the information, the name of this magazine is fleeting me now because I'm so anxious up here, but he was on the cover of a magazine that was distributed in Los Angeles, not super far from where he's murdered, that told his story. His picture was on the cover of a magazine. Can you believe that? They decided that he was important, that trans lives were important, but law enforcement, frankly, still hasn't gotten there. I still continue to speak with people out there who are trying to find the answers as much as I am, who loved Poe as much as I do. And it's just been dead end after dead end. So this week for Trans Day of Remembrance on our page, we're going to be posting a call to action. And I would deeply appreciate it if you would go take a look and make the phone calls, write the emails and letters on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women USA's page. So that's facebook.com/MMIWSA, because that's going to connect you guys to the outlets that we're trying to reach to get his story heard and to try and get justice. Because as long as the people who did this to him or person, whatever, whoever it is out there, there's a huge queer community in that area that is still extremely vulnerable. They do not have law enforcement advocacy and they do not have protection. So that being said, that's where we're at right now. But here's what I know that Poe would want me to say. Poe, like I mentioned earlier, was so many things. He was so many good things. He was so funny. He was such a strong warrior when the protests for, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd by police began in Nashville, he was homeless and he still went out there to fight. And then when they put the curfew out on the city, he didn't have a place to go, so I had the honor of housing him. I had the honor of feeding him and the honor of clothing him. He had been tear gassed, and it did physically wound him. He shed blood for the fight, for equality, for justice. That's what he was about. And I know that he had a deep respect for all of the people who made justice possible for every marginalized group in this nation and worldwide. Something else that Poe was that he was a teacher. And I don't mean an educator in a classroom, although I've had the honor of being formally educated by transgender people in the classroom setting. That's a blessing. He was a teacher in the sense that you could learn things from him by talking to him. He had been through so much, and he went through life without the guidance that you need from your parents, from aunties and uncles. He went without that, but he was so smart, and he had become so wise. He had such a good heart and was able to recognize that his struggle was a struggle, and there's, at the end of the day, no way to make that struggle not what it is. It's always going to hurt to go through that kind of thing, the things that he went through. But he was able to take lessons and share them with others. He was happy to share his experiences in life with those around him as a way to comfort them, to show them that they weren't alone, to show them that he understood, to show them that there were solutions to problems. He worked his tail off to find solutions for himself and the people he loved, and he was so loyal. And another thing that I know about Poe, relating to him being a teacher in the most social sense, is that he had great respect for all of the teachers who have made things possible today for the trans community. By teachers, I mean all of you, because myself, coming from a marginalized group, I know that when you are marginalized, when you're fighting for your life every day, whether it's because of your ethnicity, your race, gender identity, sexual orientation, when you're fighting for your life, you become forced to be a teacher. You are forced to pour that emotional energy into proving your place in this society. I understand that. He understood that very well. And so I just want to say from Poe, through me, it's always going to be hard to just over and over again have to explain why you deserve rights, why you deserve respect, why you deserve a place. Always take the time to love on yourself and to remember that you're worthy. Every face that I see in here, every face, every name on that list is a life that is so important. You are so loved. And so, even though it's tough sometimes to be teaching, the work that you're doing is the kind of work that makes it possible to be in spaces like these and have these gatherings to talk about these issues and to memorialize our friends rather than sitting alone and not being able to be who you are. The fight for rights, the fight for recognition, it is so worth it. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, every single one of you who is here, for being supportive of that, and for all of you who are a part of the trans community, I want to thank you for the teaching that you've done and will continue to do. So that's all I've got to say about Poe. I love him very much, and I wish that he was here, but I'm so glad that I get to memorialize him tonight, and I hope that you guys won't forget him either. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ray Holloman. I'm the current chair of the Tennessee Transgender Task Force. I'm doing a reading from the Black Trans Prayer Book. The title is My Breath is the Gift of Life by Deja Baptiste. The power of life and death lies in the tongue, and when you're trans, when you're awakened to yourself as goddess, as God, as deity made manifest, divinity in starlight, and grief and in bliss in the flesh. Give voice to the whispers, prayers, hopes, and lives of ancestors buried and forgotten when you defy every agent of the cis heteropatriarchy that rests on a violent binary of genitals, sex, and power. My breath is the gift of life. I had to walk lonely roads to come to myself. I had to face all-encompassing fears. I tasted bitterness, hopelessness, and the all too familiar terror that every breath could be my last, that for every smile I shared, every piece of jewelry I picked up, every time I applied my makeup, these were worth my life. So I feared, so they said. But they did not know the gifts of my body, my spirit, myself. They didn't know that my breath is the gift of life. As I spoke my name aloud for the first time, as I reclaimed my body, my sex, my rage, and my voice, as I faced down my mother and told her I was myself, my own daughter, as I pieced together every lie and broken promise of family, kinship, and support. I am made in the image of my own visions, my hopes and dreams, my half-forgotten fears. I do not live a life or in a world dominated by cis horrors. I do not live for the threat of being punished. I am no one's mistake, no one's garbage. I am not disposable. I am myself. I am no one. I am every breath we ever shared. As siblings, elders, ancestors, all, trans, unbroken, never forgotten, always transcendent, priestess of time, of hope, dignity, sorrow, and promise, my breath is the gift of life. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mina Shed. I'm a trans woman, and I'm a member of the Middle Tennessee Democratic Socialists of America. Each year, we come to a church. Each year, we recite the names of our fallen siblings. We remember the tragedies that they faced. I hope to inspire you, all of you here today, not just with the need for action and the need for solidarity, but with love. Love for all the trans people that we have lost, and the love for all of the ones that are around you. These are not just names intoned in this church. These are people with full lives, people with friends and family, peoples whose laughter I hope no one forgets, people whose thoughts will remain precious to those who were graced to hear them, people with love for those around them. I hope to convey that it is not just those that we have lost that we struggle for. And it should not be lost on you that the people on our list this evening and the people that you read about in the news are predominantly people of color, predominantly Black. For example, Leah Rashawn Day of Cleveland, Ohio. Leah was sentenced by an explicitly transphobic judge to jail after she was harassed, after she was bullied, and she stood up for herself. Leah was sentenced because she was Black, because she was trans, because she was homeless. And Leah did not just die in jail, she was murdered. She was murdered by that judge. She was murdered by the police. She was murdered by the guards, by the conditions, by the transphobic, racist, classist system that through no fault of her own and by pure accident that she was born into. As Audre Lorde reminds us, we do not lead single-issue lives. 30% of trans people experience homelessness, and that number rises for Black trans people and peaks with Black transgender women. Transgender people experience poverty at double the rate of the rest of the population. And like many of us, despite having a job, she could not afford a place to stay, a fact that has become more and more evident as the gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. Leah had a family who loved her. She was one of 8 children to Felicia Day. She loved to dance and sing to Aaliyah and Rihanna, get cocktails with her Aunt Sharika, party with her friends. She wanted to be a model. Her mother loved Leah and cared for her deeply. Leah lived and worked at City Mission Homeless Center, caring for the people in the same situation that she found herself in. She was loved by many, but abused by people in power. The end of her story may not be unique, but she was. Among Leah's personal effects that her mother retrieved from that jail was a letter. Leah left behind a letter that detailed the inhumane conditions, the assaults and harassments by the guards, the overcrowding, the rotten, poisoned food, the lack of protections from COVID-19. So Leah, even with her passing, fought and advocated for others with that letter. Think about that. Leah fought for people that she did not know, that did not know her, and in some cases did not like her, and even more, may have hurt her. She did not need to do that. She died because of her mistreatment by so many others. She didn't die for a cause. She did not need to earn our sympathy by being in a sufficient amount of pain, by being a perfect victim, by being a pitiful figure, by having a bad enough life. She deserves our sympathy and our love because she was a human being. Her death was needless, and we remember her today as someone who deserves her story to be told and deserves to be loved, and we have a duty to make a better world. I believe the goal of Transgender Day of Remembrance is to reshape the world so we do not need to have another Transgender Day of Remembrance, so that none of our names get recited in a church like this. I don't just want homeless transgender people like Leah to have access to safe shelters and safety from discrimination so they don't get arrested, and for them to be able to sleep peacefully on tents and on benches. I want free housing to every single person in this city so more people like Leah can have a dignified life. I don't just want pronoun pins on my doctor's lapel. I want extended, free, nationalized healthcare for all of my transgender and cisgender siblings, for every single service and procedure, so we don't have to choose between being healthy and getting our brakes fixed. I don't just want jobs just to choose to respect the way that we present ourselves and have protections from terminations from the federal government. I want better wages. I want better hours. I want better conditions. I want unions. I want unions with teeth, a union that understands not just solidarity with our trans workers, but all workers, a union where jobs and bosses are forced to respect all of us. I don't just want abortion to be legal. I want all of my people to be able to get free, safe abortions on demand with no apologies, with fully funded, protected clinics in every single state. I don't care about trans people having the right to serve in our military. I want our endless wars to stop. I want every military base closed. I want funding to apartheid states ended. I want every branch of the military to have their budget cut to pieces. And moreover, I don't just want sensitivity training for our police. I want the $200 million budget of the Metro Nashville Police Department to get redistributed to schools, to food, to roads, to public transportation, good jobs, Programs and services that benefit the lives of not just trans people like me in Nashville, but every person of color, every working class person in this city that has been denied the dignity that they rightly deserve. Those who oppress us, those who pass bills that prevent us from getting health care, from using bathrooms, who throw us into jail, those who separate us from the rest of the queer community, those who claim they are being silenced and they get published in the largest newspapers in their country, and they spread their poisonous lies, those who kick us out of bars and assault us in the street, they will not show us kindness, and we will not win with kindness. Tears do not win power. Power does not shed tears. Power is what we need to make change, the type of power that redistribute wealth, the type of power that takes guns away from the people that would shoot at us, power that allows us to feed our country, feed our people, clothe, house, pay, and heal for every person. Those who have power now are not going to give it up willingly. I want to take it away from them, from the people who immiserate our lives, put it in the hands of us, all of us, so that we will wield it so the lives of my brothers and my sisters and my siblings can be better, and make it so that those who were in power can never get it back. Transgender Day of Remembrance, yes, it is for contemplation. It is for grief. It is for regret. It is for melancholy. It is for sadness and reflection and love. But what Transgender Day of Remembrance is not for, it is not for an action. I ask you today, here in this room, to reflect and think, but when you leave this building, when you raise your head tomorrow, I want the questions that you ask yourself to be: am I willing to fight for people who don't look like me? Am I willing to fight for someone I don't know? Am I willing to lay on the line what I have, give what I have for a better world, and not just a little bit better, not just a world with transgender CEOs and a diverse enough ruling class, but no ruling class? If your answer is no, then I hope you have a good life and that you get the hell out of our way. But if your answer is yes, there are plenty of people already fighting for a better world in this city, because the only way that we win is through collective action. Red Door Collective, Workers' Dignity, El Mahaba Center, they are all fighting for housing justice. The Nashville Community Oversight Board needs people to be present to hold our police accountable. The Black Nashville Assembly wants your support for true public safety. Our teachers need you to lend your voice for better hours, better wages, better conditions. Your kids' bus drivers need your voice. So tonight, I want you to choose your fight, and then I want you to fight like hell. I want to see you there. Thank you.
Yes. My name is Simba Woodard, also known as Simba the Poet. I'm a father, a husband, a poet from here in Nashville. It is not okay that we have to be here, but I'm so glad that we are here, right? Tonight, I felt love, and it's not often that we can feel that emotion in a place like this. So I'm super appreciative. I appreciate you all for being here. I appreciate all of the speakers. I appreciate the folks at home. I want you to remember the love you felt here, the love you feel with your chosen families. I want you to remember your ancestors, the love and the power it took for them to get you here. And I want you to remember the love and the power that it took for you to make sure that you were here, okay? So in closing, I want to leave you all with a poem. Is that okay? Okay. For my trans siblings who were always told they weren't enough. A letter to my unborn son. Your father was never really son, never encouraged to be a man, so forgive him if he forgets. Excuse him for having feminine tendencies, son. Know that he is still a man, that he can teach you to be man. Your father probably feels like martyr to bigoted hands, no survival, and confidence knows oppression and strength like holding his ground and refusing to take knee to those who want to beat him, bloody him, blunt force. Heartbeat the color of weeping flags, son. Your mother talks about you often, attempts to convince me of how great I can be, but son, I must admit that the curve in my skeleton has me scared. Terrified that you won't see the same reflection as I. My hips hold a bowl full of spilling resentment for twisted creators. Son, a woman's womb holds your existence. Her curves mold your being. How can I teach you that masculinity is never threatened by the touch of queen, only strengthens in feminine presence? My mama was all the man that she could be in feminine flesh. Taught me how nurture could build king. Had a touch like golden bricks, she held mountains, passed them down to me. Son, I'm looking for answers in you too. Like, would you still look up to me if I cried in front of you? Inside, still able to feed life, breath, caged estrogen legs, thick with the woman's experience. Would you still want to be like me if it helps? I played sports in grade school. Before, when I was 10, I fought 2 dudes at the same time in one. See, it's proof that I can teach you to hold your own. Son. Is it okay if I'm a little different? Can I teach you of gender roles that didn't shatter its existence? Would you mind if I didn't mind if your mother made more than me, or if I taught you that black men can be womanist too, or does that make me too woman? Or is being afraid of being feminine not masculine enough? Son, that would tell you that I'm not masculine enough, will demonize my existence, attempt to prove to you that my curves are still there, sprouting like dying roses, home to cherry blossom scented memories. Be prepared, because they will try to take my life. And you'll watch your mother and grandmother worried for me because I refuse to hide my identity, still counting how many resembling my being have been killed in the past 3 months. And in 2017, Jaquarius Holland, China Gibson, Kiki Collier, Misha Caldwell, Billet pitched their beauty, attempted to mock their bones, ripped their security. Sierra McElveen, stabbed to death, cried songs with the insects in the bayou, skin burned for its last piece of acceptance. Two-Spirit, Jamie Lee, wounded arrow. I gotta be truthful. There is nothing stopping me from being next, other than my motivation to live for you, son. It's okay if you're a little confused. Know that I will always be honest to my unborn child. I'm sorry I always initially referred to you as son. I guess since I was never able to be one, I feel the need to live through you. Never felt what a black father meant to a black son. To my unborn child, regardless of my masculinity and femininity, I will always be your father. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love all of you. Y'all be safe, and continue to love on one another. All right.